First, I want to thank you all for having me here. For those of you who haven't experienced my far-reaching fame, being sarcastic, I'm the founder, head writer, and editor for DividedUnderGod.com, and the author of Understanding an Atheist, Practical Guide to Relating to Non-Believers. In today's talk, I'd like to give you an introduction to who I am, kind of my background a little bit, what Divided Under God is all about, and why on earth I decided to ignore my friends and family for a year and write a book. So, and I am ex-Catholic. I was brought up in an Italian Catholic home, went to Catholic school for 9 years, and never really bought in hook, line, and sinker. I went to a public high school where I was surprisingly enough surrounded by Christians in my circle of friends. In college, I went on a journey to find my truth. Again, I found myself making friends with devout Christians who invited me to InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a Christian youth group. I believe it's international, actually, and it's kind of like high school Christian youth group for college-age kids, and they kind of evangelize to each other and that kind of thing. After a few weeks, I decided to open up my heart to Christ and be born again. The following semester, I enrolled in a course that I thought would strengthen my faith and surround me with like-minded students. After all, it was taught by a Christian, and it was called Christian Thought. It was actually a history course, and in this course, I learned about things that were never taught in my Catholic school, my church, my student fellowship group, or anywhere else that I knew. I would soon learn of the existence of Gospels that were not included in the Bible, what they said about Jesus and his claims of divinity, and the political circumstances surrounding their exclusion from the New Testament. I learned that holidays we celebrated like Christmas and Easter began as pagan or secular holidays that were adopted by Christians and given religious significance. We also covered how the tenets of Christian faith, such as the virgin birth, crucifixion, and resurrection, were not unique to Jesus at all. They had been referenced in some form or another by religions that had come before them and gone before Christianity. The basic foundations of the story of Jesus were all present in other older religions. I learned more about how Christianity was spread throughout Europe and the Americas through war and mass murder. This experience set me on a journey of my own personal research that continues today. Needless to say, after accumulating all the information I could, I came to the conclusion that it's all bullshit and that religion was created by man. Sorry, there's a little one here. Created by man to prevent chaos and control the population. So other than that, I'm a constitutional law enthusiast who was fed up with the blissfully ignorant, poorly educated, miseducated, religiously brainwashed who spread their misinformation. So the last 2 or 3 bullets here are the formula for the creation of DividedUnderGod.com. So what is Divided Under God? It was launched in 2011. It's primarily focused on issues related to separation of church and state in the U.S. And along with that, we bring to light topics such as religion, namely creationism and science class, the endless well of idiocy for the religious right that really never runs dry, various injustices towards atheists and other non-religious, and the newest feature of the site, which is examples of progressive atheism, a concept that we'll discuss a little later today. So what impact has the site had? So it's been around for about 2 or 3 years now, and in June of last year, I was contacted by a friend of mine, Chris Johnson, who actually wrote that book that's on the table over there. He's a New York photographer and author of A Better Life. He told me his stepmother, Margaret Doty, who has been living in the U.S. on a permanent visa for over 30 years, applied for citizenship, but was denied based on her refusal to take up arms in defense of the nation. She explained that she was a pacifist and was morally opposed to war, but she'd be willing to help the military in a non-combat role. She's 64, which really makes this whole situation kind of utterly ridiculous. At this time, the only objection to the requirement that was acceptable based on religious reasons, not strictly moral ones. So in order for the USCIS, or immigration, to approve, they asked Margaret for a letter on official church stationery detailing the religious reasons for her refusal to take up arms. Since she's an atheist, that wasn't possible. She probably could have had a letter written by a Universalist church or the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, but this was more of a matter of principle now, since it was a First Amendment issue, so she wanted to fight it. So I was asked to write a piece about the issue. I did, and I posted it on social media, asked a few influential contacts of mine to share the story as well, and it took off immediately. It got over 200,000 unique visitors in the first 24 hours. The story was featured on sites like CNN, Huffington Post, Raw Story, the Dawkins Foundation, Free Thought Blogs, and more. She was on her local news, and I was beginning to receive requests from national news outlets asking how they could get in contact with her. Soon after, Freedom from Religion Foundation, the American Humanist Association, and her local congressman all wrote letters to the USCIS on her behalf. They pointed out the First Amendment violation and asked them to retract their request of conscientious objector documentation. 6 days after the article was published, the USCIS retracted their request and approved Margaret's application for citizenship. I'm happy to say that she's since gone through full citizenship process and is now a U.S. citizen. So it's things like this that kind of keep the site going and keep me motivated to make as much difference as I can from behind my desk. So why did this happen? Why did Margaret's situation happen? Well, the U.S. has a strong history of Christian majority, and we can debate until the end of time whether the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation. I think most of us in the room would agree that it wasn't, but there are historians on both sides of the argument here. Nonetheless, it has a strong history of the Christian majority. So we see Christianity everywhere. The public is overwhelmingly religious compared to other industrialized nations. If you look at nations in Europe and across the globe, the first world nations, that kind of religion has taken a back seat to secularism. And when you look at national polls or international polls of religiosity, comparing industrialized nations, we are normally at the top in percentage of religions. So it's everywhere. Until more recently, non-believers have been quiet and easily ignored or an afterthought. I'd like to think that that's changing, and I think it is. And like I said, it's everywhere. In God we trust, God bless America, God and country, so help me God. It's all around us, right? It's in our songs, it's in our national motto, it's everywhere you look. So it's ingrained in our culture. And then we have intolerance that's spread through fear, shame, and indoctrination. So what do people really think of atheists? And hopefully you can see this and hear it. Maybe.
Most studies on survivors show that the atheists die first, because if you don't believe in something supernatural, how can you imagine that you yourself have supernatural abilities enough to survive?
I've talked to comedy, I just walk away. I don't know what to say.
An atheist is someone who doesn't quite believe that there is somebody out there, some God out there.
Jesus Christ.
They don't like the baby Jesus.
This is a direct and deliberate smear against Christianity.
2 years ago, they say the small Mississippi town where they lived turned against them after they complained to the principal of their son's public elementary school about class time devoted to Bible study and prayer.
We were like pariahs. Nobody would speak to us. Nobody would let their children play with my son.
Within a few days of my telling her that we are atheists, I started hearing from other people, "Oh, are you atheist?" And it was quite shocking. And within a few weeks, our landlord gave us notice.
Listen, atheist group is not pleased with one town's nativity scene. Have you heard this before?
Local leaders again tell us that the banner's not going up, the nativity scene's not going down, and Martha, this could all end up, surprise, surprise, in a lawsuit.
Boy, we've seen enough of that.
The ACLU and the atheists, basically, the atheists are just stupid.
It doesn't even fit within the public forum definition of what speech must be tolerated. So if the government officials were being idiots to even allow these atheist signs.
The billboard at 13th and Paxton Streets was paid for by American atheists and PA non-believers. Now, sometime overnight, most of it was defaced in an apparent act of protest.
Yeah, that new image is a Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra billboard that was put up this morning by Lamar Advertising. The company says since the old billboard was vandalized, it had to replace it.
A student by the name of Jessica Alquist in Rhode Island protested a banner that was placed in the auditorium of our high school at Cranston West High. And basically, the banner had a religious prayer on it. So, you know, she is an atheist. She doesn't understand why a public school would have a religious banner up. So, with the help of the ACLU, she had the high school take that banner down. As a result, she got death threats from her fellow students. In fact, some of them said that that they hope that she gets eternally raped in hell.
Hands that help are better than lips that pray.
Have you no life outside your own physical self?
No, neither do you. Nobody has a life outside their physical self. They just think they do. So in times of a crisis...
that's kind of mocking people.
Well, it's true.
No,
I'm not trying to mock anybody.
It's your belief. You are mocking people who find help and sustenance outside their immediate selves, who have a spiritual life.
We do everything that's utterly possible to protect ourselves and our family, and if we can, to help our neighbors.
I think you live in poverty. I really think you live in poverty, because if you think that this world, your life is just preparing with candles and batteries, and has no life outside your immediate physical self, I think you're missing something. Ladies and gentlemen, we are flat out of time. We wish you well preparing with your candles and batteries.
And we'll be fine, and please prepare.
Nicole says, once she said she was an atheist, your relationship with the other kids changed.
Yeah.
I remember it's like crisis. Students called her names, she said.
You know, they would call me devil worshiper. I'd walk down the halls, people would laugh at me. They would look at me really weird and stare me down.
Then she says teachers joined in.
What would they say?
This is a Christian country and if you don't let me get out.
So these are all things that, you know, we see in the media kind of constantly, things that help perpetuate the taboo of atheism. So I guess in general, you know, what causes a taboo? You know, not necessarily the atheist taboo, what causes a taboo? And I'll leave this to you guys who can participate here. Anybody have an idea of, you know, what causes a taboo in society? Don't be afraid.
Something that's been going on for decades and decades. These people to think that is the way it is. I take an example of the Cold War we had with Russia being a communist country that was considered atheist. So the word sticks around for a long time after that.
Right, sure.
Yeah, it's brainwashing. Basically.
Brainwashing, yeah.
And the question is it, I mean, the word atheism or atheist seems to really carry a lot of baggage with it, as opposed to freethinker, humanist, you know, that kind of thing. The word itself seems to, it took me a long time to just call myself an atheist because of the connotations with that word, so.
I think that people just don't like to talk about what's real, and once you mention it out loud, they panic. And it doesn't matter how true it is, it's just something you're not supposed to talk about.
Sure.
I think responsible adults too. I'll never forget one time in 6th grade, I had a girl spend the night and I had a Ouija board, so she had to leave. And when I asked her why, she said she didn't know, but her mom yelled at her on the phone and said, "Come home." So I think that responsible adults who are irresponsible and give misinformation to their own children at such an impressionable age is a big problem.
Right. So here are the things that, some of the things that I also added. So fear of those who are different causes a taboo, if you think about piercings, homosexuality, things that, atheism, things that are in, out there that people may not be comfortable with. Misinformation or spread of ignorance, discomfort with the topic, was kind of mentioned already. Perpetuation of the stigma by trusted members of the community, that could be your teachers, your parents, your clergy, and ultimately a lack of understanding, right? Because we don't open ourselves up to learning what that is. So I'm sure many of you have seen things like this before. This was a Pew Research study done earlier this year, and actually half of this is in my book. But it's divided up by political leanings. But basically, the question is, how would you react if an immediate family member were to marry someone who doesn't believe in God? And that's on the right here. Now, certainly the conservative, mostly conservative, and then down to liberal, it comes down. But overall, and I think it should be pretty alarming, that 49% of people in the U.S. that responded to the survey would be unhappy if a family member married someone who didn't believe in God. And that's part of the taboo, that's part of the stigma. People that don't understand atheism. Still 24%. So, what causes the atheism stigma? I think we already touched on it a little bit. Religious dogmas, certainly. Teaching people that atheists are led by the devil or are going straight to hell, that's for sure. Media representation of atheists, which we just saw a little bit of that in the video. A lot of attention is given to outspoken anti-theists. So like your American Atheist group who put up billboards that kind of try to get a reaction out of people, and that's what gets the reaction, that's what's in the news. So that's kind of what we get pegged with as atheists, that we're out there to destroy and to cause trouble. But the legal and encouraged discrimination. It's kind of socially acceptable to discriminate against atheists for whatever reason. The perpetuation of these ideas by trusted members of the community, again, just like taboo, it's the same thing. So, mostly by teachers and clergy and the religious, and again, a lack of understanding. So I'm going to share with you a few things that have been in the news lately that have kind of affected the image of atheists. On September 30th, a columnist named Neil Larson wrote a piece called "Militant Atheism Rears Its Ugly Head." Normally I wouldn't give an opinion piece written by someone in Idaho a second look, but for whatever reason this went kind of viral on social media. In the piece, he tells us why he finds it acceptable to discriminate against what he calls militant activist atheists. Here are a couple excerpts. He starts out the piece with, "I have a confession. I'm guilty of discrimination against militant activist atheists. I simply don't like them. If there were an epithet to describe them, I'd probably use it regularly. I would refuse to vote for a proud and vocal atheist for high office, regardless of any offsetting credentials." And later, he says, "While atheists are certainly capable of doing good works, those good works are not inspired by an absence of belief in God. How could they be? If atheists do good, it is in spite of, not because of, their atheism. So let's stop acting like not believing is just another super awesome way of believing." So it's a prime example of people's perceptions of non-believers, right? A lot of people can make the argument that we do good works because of our atheism. Because we know that this world is the only world we're going to live in, this is the only life that we have, and we want to make it better. So, again in the piece, he goes on to deliver what I consider a very ironic message from an outwardly religious person. He says, "I do have a problem with those who proselytize and demand that the rest of us cater to their unbelief, as though that unbelief in itself is a virtue worthy of our nurture and respect." So why is this ironic? Let's see. So we'll take the opposite of this statement. We'll take out the uns and add a not, and we expose kind of a double standard here. I do not have a problem with those who proselytize and demand that the rest of us cater to their belief, as though that belief itself is a virtue worthy of our nurture and respect. So how many times have we come across this sentiment by outspoken religious people? It appears that what Larson is condemning us for is the exact thing that the outwardly religious often expect in return. So I don't know if anyone has heard of this. This was in the news a couple weeks ago, and I wrote a piece for it on the site as well. On September 23rd, I wrote a piece for Divided Under God after reading a news article and then doing what everyone says not to do. I read the comments. Most things really don't get to me. I have thick skin, and it's really hard to cross the line with me. But it really got to me. So I'd like to share the story for those who may not have read it. So this is what I wrote on the site. Today started like any other day for me. I got up and got myself and my son ready for the day. I took him to school, and I went back home to work. At some point in the morning, a headline caught my attention about a 22-month-old boy, Braden King, who died by drowning in a baptismal fountain in Alabama. I clicked on the story and read the toddler's mother was in church preparing for a prayer meeting, and her 13-year-old daughter was put in charge of the boy. After losing track of Braden, she searched for him and found him unconscious in the baptismal fountain he had drowned. It's a tragic story no matter how you slice it. While the religious news outlets took the prayer and faith angle, secular sites reported the story plainly with no attempt to make sense of the horrific accident. The bottom line, though, is that a mother lost her baby, 2 older sisters lost their little brother. As a father of a 3-year-old, I was saddened as I tried to put myself in her position. I just couldn't imagine. Then I read some of the comments about the story in secular Facebook groups I belong to, and a mix of emotions came over me. I was disgusted, I was horrified, I was angry. Above all, I was deeply discouraged. Here's a sample of what I saw on Facebook. I guess God needed another angel. Stop talking to an imaginary friend and pay attention to your child, and it would never happen. Yahweh is not a big fan of toddlers. Well, now it can't grow up to be a gay baby, or it would never get to heaven. God, here's your son. LOL, just kidding. God is the ultimate troll. These examples only scratch the surface. There are many more on Facebook, Twitter, and in the news articles themselves. I can only imagine that some of the atheists who wrote these comments are the same who complain about how we're treated in the media, by government, and by our neighbors, friends, and families. It's likely that these same people feel that atheists are discriminated against, stigmatized, and unfairly prejudged. The first step in changing perceptions is to take control of them. If we want to be seen in a new light, then we need to walk the walk. We need to prove that we shouldn't be prejudged. That the word atheist should not be treated as taboo. If we speak out in public forums as atheists, either in our communities or in cyberspace, then we are all representatives of the atheist movement, whether we like it or not. The power to improve our image is solely ours. This was my response to the commenters above. I detest atheist infighting more than most, and I avoid it as much as I can. But things like this need to be addressed. If we are to be successful in correcting perceptions, then we must look inward first. If we play into the stereotype that atheists are uncaring, evil people who hate everything and everyone, then we'll never see progress. Stop giving the religious what they want. A few years back, the Secular Coalition for America printed up some voter guides. In them, they rated politicians on how their views aligned with secular voters. Dick Durbin, a senator from Illinois, received a high rating based on his voting record and attitudes towards church-state separation. He's up for re-election this year, and his opponents have erected a billboard in an attempt to smear him using SCA's rating. It says, Dick Durbin, A rating from the atheist lobby, worked with atheists and the IRS against religious freedom. So since the IRS is mentioned here, I can only imagine that Durbin has a stance against churches endorsing political candidates, which is a violation of their tax-exempt status, and something that people are constantly urging the IRS to crack down on. But let's face it, we're terrible people, but we're not the IRS. But really, this is what I mean by discrimination against atheists being encouraged. Imagine if this said the Jewish lobby or the Catholic lobby. There would be a lot of people up in arms about it. So things like this are what inspired me to want to fight back and change perceptions. In order to do that, I reflected on my own experiences and started there. So why write this book? Bless you. It's ingrained. Speaking of, been an atheist since '95, surrounded by a Catholic family. My wife was a Catholic who had a lot of questions about her own faith and later deconverted. We had a son, Ryan, who was born in 2011, and then soon thereafter, the questions about baptism started to surface. I mentioned this in the book, and I'd like to read a quick excerpt of that. So, while the religious affiliation choice was made by my parents on my behalf, my wife and I haven't made that choice for my son. Shortly after he was born in 2011, questions began coming in from family and close friends regarding when he would be baptized. As the majority of my wife's and my family is Catholic, that was the expectation. Most of the individuals posing these questions were not aware that we're both atheists, especially since we were married in a Catholic church. At the time of our wedding, my wife was still Catholic, but struggling with her faith at times. We decided to get married in a church for more of a traditional purpose than a religious one. So when asked, I responded that my son will not be baptized, and most of the conversations ended there. Usually with a surprised look or an eye roll, since this was a huge deviation from family tradition. For some, the discussion continued. There would be no godparents, no baptism celebration and gifts, and no wearing of the baptismal gown worn by the other members of the family who came before him. This was very upsetting to some, especially those closest to us. I fielded questions and statements like, why would you make him an atheist? Don't you want to give him a choice? Why don't you baptize him just in case he decides to be Catholic later? You should do it for your family anyway, it doesn't mean anything to you. And my favorite, which I actually considered, at least do it for the gifts. Although I expected people to ask about the potential baptism, I was not prepared for the negative reactions from family members who openly showed their disapproval of our parenting decision. What I realized, though, is that they asked these questions because they didn't understand our point of view. This would prove to be an aha moment that would ultimately pave the way for this book. So this, along with the seemingly constant misrepresentations of atheists all around us, helped me come to the realization that believers do not understand who we are. And I wanted to do something about it. So who are we? We're atheists, agnostics, non-believers, freethinkers, humanists, secularists, call us what you will. We are people who don't believe in God. We're friends, relatives, neighbors, public servants, teachers, athletes, and even clergy. But the bottom line is, atheists are the same people you thought we were before you knew we were atheists. Most importantly, who are we not? And I don't know where this came from, so please, other atheists in the room, help me find out where this started. We don't need babies. I see it everywhere. People say that they're atheist baby eaters. I don't get it. I don't know where it came from. What else are we not? We are not devil worshippers. We don't believe in one. What else are we not? We are not angry at God. We don't believe in a God. So what do we want? As atheists, as humanists, secularists, etc., what do we want? Does anyone want to chime up?
I know what I want.
What do you want?
I want to be able to talk about what's real and tangible and not what's not real. And the fact that you said that you got married in a church because it's tradition. It's also tradition to give money away to get rid of that horrible female child I had, you know. Have a dowry, get rid of her, she's your problem now. You know, I mean, you keep up with tradition, it doesn't necessarily promote independence or confidence.
Okay? Anybody else? What do we want as atheists, as atheist members of the community?
We want the government to not favor religion in publicly funded places or events.
Agreed.
We don't want them not paying taxes.
Yes, definitely.
Churches should pay property tax. Clergy should not get money off on their income tax.
Agreed. Okay, so for me, my number one, what do we want is equality. And I think that means a lot of things. We want a truly secular government. We want to be judged as individuals rather than prejudged based on stigma, right? I think that's true for everyone, whether you're an atheist or not. Some want the elimination of all religion based on the harm it causes, and I can certainly agree with that. I don't know if that's realistic or not, but we'll work on it. And to be understood by our religious loved ones. So, just a brief overview of the book. It's directed primarily towards believers with atheist loved ones. It's a great gift for Christmas. I don't aim to tear down religion or the religious. That's not my goal. I take a reader through my experience as a Catholic, turned saved Christian, turned atheist, describe the coming out process, kind of the typical one. It's difficult to write something about atheists because atheists are a lot of different people, right? And everybody's got a different experience. But I wrote this based on kind of what I feel is the most common experience for atheists going through the coming out process. Based on people I've talked to and experiences I've had. So I explained atheism discrimination, like was presented a little earlier. And then in the book I have a few testimonials from people who have been there. Religious people who have atheist loved ones, sister, spouse, child, who have kind of turned their back on the atheist in their life and then had that awakening where they realized that that really wasn't the thing to do and kind of made the effort to understand their loved one. Another thing in the book is that I try to answer some frequently asked questions, because there's a lot of questions that I found that believers have about atheists that they're too afraid to ask or not comfortable enough to ask because because of the taboo and in a lot of households we don't talk about religion and we don't talk about politics. Now let's eat. So I try to kind of start the conversation really rather than complete it. Real quick. Why not believe just in case? So Pascal's wager kind of explained, is it okay to pray at meals? Why do you celebrate Christmas and other holidays? How can you be moral without religion? And actually morality predates religion. Why are you so angry? I get that all the time, probably because I am. How do you have meaning in your life without religion, without God? What are you striving for? What happens when you die? The simple answer is you're dead. And doesn't it take more faith to be an atheist? And isn't atheism just another religion? I also talk a little bit about the popping up of atheist churches. Finally, in the book, I introduce a concept I call progressive atheism. Progressive atheism is an effort to reshape perceptions of atheists and break away from the taboo or stigma associated with the word. I define it as this. The shift in attitude from an adversarial relationship with the religious to a partnership with progressive religious groups in an effort to work toward a common goal. The destigmatization of atheists through good works and positive interactions with communities. So why? Why work with the religious? Why try to promote progressive atheism? An adversarial relationship is detrimental to the perception of atheists, right? So if everything people see in public is atheists trying to take down the religious, then certainly we have a poor public image. We'll try to promote understanding through collaboration, communication, and partnership. And show communities that we're not all here to destroy America, as Fox News would have you believe. And attack the atheism stigma. We'll also show communities that we're here for good, and that's kind of twofold. We're here to stay, and we're here to help the community. We're here to be productive members of the community. And to show others who may be on the fence that it's okay to question faith, and there's good beyond God. So some of the reactions I get from this type of philosophy, we'll call it, look a little bit like this. Work with the religious or you're nuts, and I hate religion, it's a cancer. And there are people that don't care about what the image of atheists are in the community. There are people who want to fight it at every turn and don't care, and that's fine. And everyone's got their own decisions and their own kind of motivations there. But my response is that you can be an anti-theist and a progressive atheist at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. So you don't have to like religion, and you can certainly fight back against those who use the religion to mask their bigotry, or those who harm others with it. So what I'm advocating for is kind of number one, to do good works as open atheists, right? And to come together with socially progressive religious groups as atheists working towards a common goal. So who's doing this today? National organizations like Foundation Beyond Belief. If you haven't heard of them, please check them out. They do great work. Openly Secular, which I believe is a new piece of the Dawkins Foundation. Humanist Charities, which is part of the American Humanist Association. The British Humanist Association, and then local organizations, most notably the Kansas City Atheists. If you haven't heard of them, they're in the news quite often. And the CNY Humanists, I've never heard of them, but I guess I'm standing in the room. And there's many others. So it won't always be easy. And you can ask the Kansas City Atheists because they know. Last Thanksgiving, they were turned away from helping to feed the homeless on Thanksgiving Day. They assisted a local religious organization called the Kansas City Rescue Mission for the previous 2 years, and they were finally rejected in the third year because the organization said that the Kansas City Atheists were not a good fit to work with them, because their new mission was to use the opportunity to convert homeless and use religious pamphlets, issue religious pamphlets, so the atheist group was not allowed anymore. They didn't want to threaten that effort. So that story kind of went in the local news in Kansas City, and being a well-known group, they got flooded with requests from other religious groups to help them out. They chose one called Micah Ministry, and Kansas City Atheists put out a statement about their kind of new affiliation with this other group. And what they said about them was they don't require an acceptance of faith from those who volunteer, nor do they ask one of those who need a warm meal for the night. They accept all who enter their doors, regardless of faith, sexual orientation, race, creed, or legal standing. We're quite excited to simply work together and sincerely help those who are less fortunate. So with this statement, they kind of pumped up Micah Ministry and their kind of progressive attitude and slam the old people pretty hard, I'd say. So can we be successful with this type of outreach? As open atheists, we are representatives of all atheists, whether or not we want to be. So when you attend something as an atheist or as a humanist, whether it's your intent or not, it's human nature to judge, right? It's human nature to judge on first impressions, and we are representatives of the atheist movement, or whatever you want to call it. And something that I try to do is strive to surprise, right? So one of the best compliments you can get is when someone says to you that doesn't know yet that you're an atheist, and the topic of religion comes up, and they say, "You're an atheist?" Because they know you from something else, and they know that you're a good person, and they know of your other contributions to the community and things like that, and they're surprised by that. Well, that kind of teaches them that, hey, there's good ones out there, right? So every good work or positive reaction becomes a learning experience for those who don't understand atheism or humanism. So we can take advantage of these opportunities to put a human face on a taboo ideology. And again, every good work or positive interaction kind of takes away that atheism stigma and makes it a little more acceptable, kind of a little bit at a time. So here's a clip, obviously from Real Time with Bill Maher, if anybody's a fan. He's talking with a progressive minister named Reverend Jim Wallace. They're talking about the difference between the Bible and religion and the problem Bill has with Christianity. If you don't know Bill, I would imagine everybody does, he's a very outspoken atheist comedian. Elliot Spitzer is on the panel and jumps in. And what he does is kind of sum up what we can do to promote partnership across lines of faith and ultimately promote understanding.
If Christians were acting like Christians, would you feel differently about Christians?
As Jesus, as a philosopher, I'm down with you, Padre. I think he's a great philosopher. But
can I jump in on Jim's side?
Yeah.
And here's what. I almost always agree with you. That's why I love being here. But I think that we've got to embrace those voices in the religious community who find in the Bible a progressive argument. Because what has happened in our politics, and I hate to bring religion so much into our politics, what's happened to our politics is we've let fundamentalist religion dictate our political discourse. And when we hear voices in the religious world finding progressive, socially just arguments, what I heard you saying about help those who are most poor, I read John Rawls that way. You know, the Bible, John Rawls, political philosophy. I think we've got to embrace those voices and say, yes, we are of common purpose. We do.
So, I guess in a nutshell, that's kind of what I'm going for here. To create those partnerships with progressive groups, and progressive being key, because we don't want to butt heads while we're doing it with those who, kind of don't want to work with us, right? So we seek out those people that are willing to work with us, so that we can kind of change perceptions along the way and create some understanding. And that's it for me. So again, thank you for having me here. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook. There's the book and the website. Check that out if you haven't already. So thank you.